Good morning. Welcome to Shambles Stay at Home Festival. Good morning, Josie Long.
Good morning. I'm good. My daughter is calling to me through the door of the room. It's actually been a lovely morning, so I'm feeling very chipper and very excited to be here. And also, I thought it was Saturday, and it's not. Oh,
it's not the weekend yet. Not the weekend yet. Don't you start relaxing and lying around the house yet. That's what I was trying to work out, because of course tomorrow is the last school day, and then trying to explain to the child.
Today's Friday.
Oh, so yeah, you're right. Friday.
As you just said, tomorrow is Saturday.
Yeah. So but it is. So yeah, it's the last end, and then you have to work out how do you now remold the small area of where you live into a holiday situation. Do you use the attic as the equivalent of a trip to Rome, and then send souvenir postcards with various different images of detritus that are left around the house? How can we replicate these things? It's going to be tricky.
What's your plans?
Well, we're going to have a holiday in the attic for a while and send some postcards to each other from there. And then there's a little back room, a little corner there behind some of my books and stuff. And that might be one of the very interesting rural areas that we go and visit. So I think that's going to be the best we can do. Yesterday we did one of those. I was saying before, but I love all the different ways that people are using the communication that's there. My wife's family, they're all connected up to play Trivial Pursuit. So 4 different branches of family, all connected by Skype, all still having the same arguments, the same fury that blue pie question is so much easier, that obviously of course it's Daryl Hannah was a mermaid, all of those things. So it was nice. It replicated Christmas without necessarily the physical contact.
Yes, it's really beautiful, just like Christmas. Me and Johnny played Scrabble and had a pie last night, and it really felt like we'd chosen to do that, and that there wasn't other things that we'd rather be doing.
That was your date. That was your date night, wasn't it? This is your monthly date night.
Yes, my partner Johnny's got really, really into Instagram. He's going on runs and he's making little videos about his runs, and he's doing about 5 Instagram posts a day, having before only posted once in 2018. So it's a big deal for him. Yeah.
Have you got a show and tell this morning? Oh, brilliant.
So when I was away on tour, I was missing my daughter terribly, even though I was only away from her the odd day, really. She won't wear gloves. She won't do it. She will not tolerate a glove or a hat. And it was cold, and I was thinking, God, how can I convince her? So I knitted her these very cute fingerless gloves, and I also knitted matching gloves for a dolly of hers and a teddy of hers, so in kind of 3 different sizes, and a scarf for the teddy and a hat for the teddy. And what it meant was that she wouldn't put the gloves on at all, and then she lost all the matching gloves. So it was a resounding success. I only have this one to show for it. It's never been worn. And the worst part is I really, really thought about the pattern and everything. So yeah, I have this fruitless attempt at clothing my daughter. To be fair to her, she does dress the teddy in the gloves and scarf. But yeah, I found that and I thought it was a nice thing to do.
This is what because we've both had this experience. Both of us have in our audience sometimes not merely knitters who knit when they're not seeing your show, but quite often people who actually knit during your show. What do you think it is about both of us that somehow that it seems knitters have been drawn to that world? It's a beautiful thing to see someone who's actually enjoying a show, but also creating something themselves at the same time.
Cardigan-based performer, Robin, and I feel like if somebody comes to see you a number of times, it's really in their face. You're flaunting it, the knitwear, and I feel like after a few shows, people are going to feel like if they don't produce some knitwear of their own, they're not reciprocating properly. And they have said that. They've said he flaunts wool like Lenny Bruce flaunted 4-letter words. That's pretty much what I'm the Lenny Bruce of lamb's wool. That's what I reckon. You've been arrested by a number of shepherds. What's your show and tell, Robin?
My show and tell is something that Helen Zaltzman did for me, and I'm sure you might have some of these as well. Helen Zaltzman, who went on to do, has done some incredible podcasts. I don't know if her podcast is out at the moment.
So she's one of the people who started podcasts. She was the first person to sort of regularly make a brilliant professional podcast.
I don't know. We were doing them in 2005. Shut up, Josie. Let's pretend we're pioneers for a moment, but we weren't as brilliant as her. So let's be fair about that. But it was. And she also used to play the xylophone as well at the book club shows that we did. She was a wonderful xylophone accompanist, which made this very nice kind of lo-fi sense of the Velvet Underground, while the poetry of Danielle Steele was read out. And I was obsessed years ago with a friend of mine, Charlie Skelton. We used to come up with ridiculous different versions of Yo Mama is so fat. And one of our jokes is, your mama is so fat, when she gets up in the morning to put on her jeans, more often than not, she finds that she has eaten them. And that was then turned into that. I don't know if you can, how well you can see that. Where a decorated general or emperor doing that particular joke, and that is my show and tell. That is the art of Helen Zaltzman.
I have one in the other room, but I can't get to it because it will disrupt the baby situation. This sort of very cheery looking 1970s, 1980s old school comedian who I don't know. I think she sort of found the picture. It's not a famous person, and he's saying champion. And I love it so much. It's been on my wall ever since.
I'll find, because I've got another one somewhere which we took down in that interim period where you're a little bit uncertain about swearing in front of your children. But now my son watches Friday Night Dinner and the young ones and everything. It doesn't matter anymore. But there was that interim. It's like I used to have a wonderful, great big poster, European poster for a film called The Devil's Daffodil, and it was Christopher Lee. It was a German, Spanish, French, Italian, and Channel Islands co-production, and it had kind of like a woman in a basque and someone taking heroin and all these things in the early 60s. And there was that point where we went, now the children are 3, we better change that. And now it's a poster for an Ingmar Bergman film, and we're going to have to change that again, because that, of course, deals a lot with existential anxiety. And now we'll have to change
better to have the daffodils and the heroin, to be honest, a bit simpler.
I think we're going to go back to that, or The Sword and the Sorcerer, I would imagine. One of those.
Did somebody say heroin?
Finally, the second week and the madness of the heroin panda.
I just let me have a look at it. No, come on.
This is a wonderful segue as well, because don't forget, later on, your heroin panda will be able to ask Suzi Gage questions about drugs.
Yes, my name is Peggy. I'm a friend to the show. Sorry.
We should say today we have Lee Ridley, Lost Voice guy, who was won the BBC Radio New Comedy Awards, and also Britain's Got Talent.
Britain's Got Talent.
I know,
that's amazing. A bigger deal than the BBC Radio Comedy Awards.
I know, but I'm giving. Look, I'm 51. I listen quite often to Radio 4. I don't watch ITV quite so much anymore. Though I've seen a couple of rather interesting things on Netflix. We're also joined by Suzi Gage, whose brilliant podcast, which is now also a book, Say Why to Drugs. We'll be talking about that. But first of all, we are joined by Mr. Good morning, Ed. Good morning.
Hi. And a very good morning to both of you. How are you?
Good.
Hello. Hello.
How are you finding this? Because I know when I was travelling around the country, I'm sorry to start with this, but your magnificent tour poster, by the way, can I first of all say the image that you had for your tour poster was so, if people haven't seen it, look up afterwards. This really great image, a very outdoorsy kind of image. It's the country file side of you.
Yeah.
You're getting ready for hiking.
Well, the show's called If I'm Honest, and the poster's supposed to be reminiscent of those sort of like John Denver, that kind of 70s album cover, that real sort of, this is the real me in a sort of outdoor countryside post. It was specifically the fact that I've got a little twig in my hand that I'm sort of sniffing. It's from a George Thorogood album cover. And that was sort of, and the background is a painting of the outdoors. So it's sort of simple, and I'm also quite, you can see I'm quite sort of, let's say, overproduced. The faces, there's been some post-production done on it. So it's a sort of juxtaposition of the concept of honesty, and this is the real me, with a sort of sheen put on it. A lot more thought went into it than normally goes into my posters, I have to say.
Has anybody...
really striking. And it's also as well.
Because it's a lot more thought went into the show, and now I can't do it.
Tell me about it. And Ed, does anyone ever come up to you and gone, "Oh, I like the Lee Thorogood reference on your poster"?
The George Thorogood, no one picked up on it. Absolutely nobody. It was the photographer Idil Sukan who's done a lot of people's posters. Who who picked up that particular. When I said 70s album cover, this is the real me, denim clad, that sort of thing. She went, I think I'm just the one. So that was the real inspiration.
For about 10 years, I used.
Go on,
Sorry.
Josie.
Well, I was just saying, for about 10 years, I used to always put a song lyric into one of my shows just to see if anyone would ever spot it. So, like, I had a Manic Street Preachers lyric in my show for like a whole year and a half. And one person once was like, there's a Manic Street Preachers lyric. And I was like, yes, it was worth it for that.
Yeah, I have a similar thing. I like to sneak a movie quote in that's just personal to me. In this current show, it's man's got to know his limitations, which is Clint Eastwood's catchphrase from Magnum Force.
Yeah,
and very few people go, Was that a Magnum Force reference? Yes, well done.
Oh, that's. But whereas I again showing the kind of ridiculous, kind of anachronistic nature of me, mine was normally hard-boiled eggs and nuts. And which is from County Hospital by Laurel
and Hardy, yeah.
But now it's so. But it's interesting that bit of when you've come up with a very small, it's a very minor reference, like you're talking about, the poster. And I remember one which really annoyed me was I did a show called Robin Ince Isn't Waving, and it wasn't a very successful. It was one of the worst stand-up shows I think I've done. It really, looking back, I'm ashamed. But it had a good poster, which was
you in the sea, and you're waving. And I remember you saying this, and a friend of yours said, "But you're on the cover, you're on the poster, and you're waving." And you go, "No, the point is, I'm obviously drowning." Like that's the joke, right?
And that the bit me going, I'm sorry, do you not know the poetry of Stevie Smith? Well, do you know what? This stuff is just wasted on everyone.
My mum that poem so much, and she, throughout my childhood, would just kind of wistfully quote it to me. So I have this really, really strong connection to it. But I feel like it's quite a dark poem to be constantly sort of reaffirming to your child, isn't it?
Yeah, just so you know, Josie, you will feel lost for the whole of your life. Anyway, let's have Sementina.
I had a poster a few years ago. I did a show, more than 10 years ago now. It was called Standing Up and Falling Down. And it was based around the plot of the film Falling Down. And I was sort of used it as sort of jumping off points for various frustrations. And the poster was the same as the poster, had the same, typeface and everything. And instead of holding a shotgun, I'm holding a microphone stand. It was a fairly iconic picture, I felt, the Falling Down poster with Michael Douglas. And then when I went to Australia to do the show there, they just changed the poster. The promoter just said, "Nah, don't think anybody really remembers that film." Like, you didn't even ask me. So you've just got a photograph of my face. I'm sure that film is more famous than my face.
I think it's when we realise that even kind of some of the more mainstream comics that we know, most of us are more niche than we imagine. There are things which we believe are everyone must know because we focused on them, and then you find out everyone else walked by. It's our obsession means that sometimes.
I'm certain that the film Falling Down, starring Michael Douglas, is more well known than I am. I don't think that's amazing. I don't think I'm being false modest there. I reckon that's a more successful entertainment entity than me. It made more money than I've ever made. So I'm quite happy to say that if you think I'm well known enough to bother putting me on a poster, then definitely that film is more well known.
Ed,
that would be my opinion.
I'd like to ask you,
yes.
Are you finding this experience conducive to writing stand-up comedy?
God, no.
Good.
And it's funny. And my manager, who's been my manager since I started, so 27 years, is like, "Oh, well, you can just start working on the next show now." No, I can't. Every time I think of an idea, I have to go to a comedy club and try it out. I don't know something's funny until I hear an audience laughing at the first time. So it's not getting written until I can actually get out there and give it a whirl. So there's nothing getting written right now. I have just written off this year. I am lucky enough that I have a house which has equity I can release, which is another way of saying I've had to remortgage. But yeah, I can sort of sit on my arse for a year, and I'm lucky enough in that way. But everything has just been reset for me. I'm just sitting and doing nothing and then hopefully can pick up. Luckily, I'm not the most topical comedian in the world. So the show I had been touring, that'll be picking up again next January, jokes about raising kids and being useless will still be funny next year. There's not a massive amount of stuff about, Brexit which in fairness would still be rumbling on anyway, So yeah, I've just had to just sit tight.
Well, I know that you have got though something to show in terms, because I do love, it was only a few years ago that I really became aware of how much you enjoyed the outdoor life, and that kind of and getting out there and I wonder, how are you finding what have you found to kind of replace for the time being the ability to yomp through the countryside and up mountains?
Luckily enough, I have a decent enough sized garden. It's not massive. They can't get lost in it or anything like that. But I have got I've got a woodpile I've been working on.
I think that's going to be your show and tell, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can we see?
Would you like to see it now?
I think this is the biggest show and tell. This is.
I don't have like trees, in my garden. I have a couple of trees, but not the ones that I don't use them for the woodpile. But I know people who've got sort of woodland next to them and around them. I know some farmers in the area, and when they get a tree down, they let me take it.
What part of the world are you in?
Essex, near Saffron. This is really quite magnificent. I've built the frame as well. See, this is my woodpile.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, that's mainly blackthorn and hawthorn, that is. But that's yeah.
I was going to say it looked like a thorn cut.
And so is that really in terms of the log process? Really
very happy with that.
Was that the dampest logs you showed us, and then you scanned across into the drying section, or is there a Jenga-based system in your log?
It'll sort of move about. The next ones to burn will be these ones here. These ones here are the driest, and the last ones will be these ones here. These are the freshest down here. I'll be sorry to let them go because those look particularly uniform, don't they?
Mm.
Yeah. Do you ever find that the destruction of structure ultimately is more worrying than the need for warmth? I mean, I suppose that's part of the whole problem with entropy in the universe, anyway. But
I love about they always say about wood is that wood will warm you twice. Once when you're chopping it, and then when you burn it. You get more warmth from the exercise of actually chopping it than you do from when you set fire to it. Anyway, that's me. That's the busy I've been keeping. It's funny. I keep getting asked, like, "Oh, why didn't you do some stuff online? Why didn't you do that?" Like I wouldn't have already done stuff online if I was, that sort of person. It never would have occurred to me to do it when online was invented. I don't have any characters or sketches lying around that I've been dying to just put out there. It's like, well, you can just do that. Why don't you just do some stuff from home? Because I don't do that. That's why I can't do that. I think if I could do that, I wouldn't already have been doing that. The one good thing about the shut-in for everybody, this hairstyle's becoming quite fashionable. I've had coronavirus shutdown hair my whole career, and now everybody's just following suit.
Thinking of your career, I would. By the way, we just have to say that on the live feed, there are a lot of people who've said they have woodpile envy.
Yeah.
So this is,
so you should. I almost feel like I'm going to be a miser with it now. I'm just going to never burn it. I'm just going to sit and admire it and just use the central heating.
I just see now your children wrapped up in all manner of rags. Can we have a log now, Father? No, not yet. You're not cold enough to ruin the log pile.
If I were to ruin the symmetry of the entire thing.
I wanted to ask you something about your stand-up, actually, because when you started, you were one of those people who I think felt quite fully formed. From the first gigs that I saw you at, you were a very impressive comic, and it was back, what was it, 94, something like that, 95 maybe.
I was stealing from a lot of people, so
that was an interesting.
Anyway, that's nice of you to say.
But years ago, when I was gigging in South Africa, and I remember going to one of the comedians' houses, and I thought, my God, I've never seen so many VHSs of stand-up comics. This guy has a huge collection. And then that night, I watched his act, and I went, oh, I have never seen the results. I've only so many VHSs of. But what I wondered was, we had Joe Brand on the other day, and I remember Joe saying something when I was a young stand-up. She said the trouble with being a stand-up is actually you don't really know who you are till you're 30. And I wondered, as someone who actually was very impressive, you know, for in their early 20s, now when you look back, do you feel there is a way that you, how much has changed in the way you can express yourself and the world you show? And you think, yeah, there is a point where you suddenly go, now you were an effective stand-up, now there's something much fuller about that, something fuller about the expression of it.
I think when I was younger, I would say anything to get a laugh, and for the most part, that proved quite effective. I think now I am probably and I don't think it's necessarily because of the backlash you get from people complaining afterwards via social media. I just think I'm more careful about what I say, and I don't think I'm as brash necessarily on stage but I think that just comes with age. I have the main difference, and I've said this a lot of time in interviews and it may not seem like a big deal, but between now and when I was younger, is that I won't say anything that I don't actually think is true now, unless it's an absolute obvious joke. You know what I mean? Like, and then I killed him, whatever. You know. But like when I was younger, I would say I used to have a whole routine about hating kids, and I've never hated kids. I used to be a baby. I've always liked kids, but I would say that I hated it because it was a useful comedy device, and now I just wouldn't. I just, even if it's only a minor thing, it's not necessarily about politics or anything like that. But, when I was, if I would say I was single, even if I was going out with somebody, if I had a good joke about being single. But now I just have a thing that I like to tell the truth, It's that's a major difference.
No, but I think it makes one a more real, like, people know deep down they'll enjoy a routine that's based on something that's obviously a construct, and you can go so far with it. But if you're actually explaining something that you believe or that you've deeply felt or that's real, people just know and they connect with it better. Because
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, I do look back on some of the brasher, younger me stuff, and even like the routine about Alanis Morissette's Ironic. The structure that was all well and good, but there's a bit at the start where I'm just giving out about her in general and calling her like a moany cow and a whining. And I look back on that and go, I'm not comfortable with that at all now. I really, really don't like it. It's unnecessarily mean, and so that's just one of the differences, I think.
Yeah, I think that's that bit where you are doing, to a certain extent, received ideas. You're doing the presumption of what I think this is what the audience wants, and I think this is what a comic would do. I don't know if that makes sense. This is what a comic would do, and then there's a point for where you go, oh, this is what I want to do. I don't have to play the part of a comic.
In the 90s as well, that sort of loaded FHM sort of era, that ladsy comedy with people like Frank Skinner and stuff like that, and even sort of early sort of Newman and Baddiel, and that brashness was very in vogue, and that sort of, hey, chicks, huh? Was very kind of we worked. It was very effective, and I think I look back on some of that, and don't feel entirely proud of everything that came out of my gob.
No, I think that's, but that's good, isn't it? Because it means that even though you can feel, and I still feel, there's bits where I go, I can't believe I did that joke or about that, whatever it might be, that at least means you go, oh, good, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago and the person 10 years ago, and that's some kind of progress, hopefully.
Yeah, and also, sorry. Acknowledge.
Great.
You go.
This is the conversational equivalent of standing on a path and just getting out of each other's way and getting in each other's way by doing so. No, I think sometimes when it comes to that, the what we call cancel culture, a lot of the time when we talk about when you earn, I mean, it's one thing when you earn something from somebody said like 2 years ago, that's fair enough. But when you earn something that somebody said 20 years ago, and go, oh, look at how. What they thought. Look how transphobic that was, or look how sexist that was, and like that. partly you kind of go, well, should we not also be congratulating ourselves for how far we've come in 20 years? That is no longer acceptable, rather than hauling people out for what they said 20 years ago. Should we not be slightly proud that what that person said 20 years ago is now not acceptable anymore?
But also, here we all are saying, if there were things I said back then and they're not acceptable, even I acknowledge that and don't like it. So I feel like if people were to find things from the past and say, look, why did you do this? I think all of us would be up for being like, I really would never do that now. So I think it's like all of us can just understand context and still be a bit like, appreciative of that.
Although having said that, I still can't believe that Eddie Murphy's delirious that he ever worked again. When you look at the things he said about AIDS and gay people in that, even 6 months later, by the time it hit the cinema, it was like, oh no, dude, no, that's not. He
became like a family star.
He did kids movies.
Daddy Daycare and Daddy Daycare too. Anyway, happy birthday, Eddie Murphy. 59th day. We're going to go over to Lee in a moment. I'll just quickly mention that we have a little tip jar at the bottom. Probably a lot of you know this anyway, whether you're watching this on YouTube, whether you're watching it live now. We're basically collecting a fund together for a lot of the kind of performers and artists who will have no work over the next few months. Because as Ed kind of mentioned there, really, even when this ends, this period, I think a lot of performers anyway, everything's been cancelled, at least as far as kind of, I think we're now looking at the end of July is the emails that are coming now. So we're trying to make sure that we've got a fund for some of those people who are the comics who just, and the singers and all of the different artists who are going to have problems over the next few months. And also for some of the smaller art centres and places like that, again, which are going to really struggle after this. So we're trying to make sure that we've got some money that we can give to them as well. So if you are able to leave something in our virtual tip jar, that is fantastic. Thank you very much.
Not for us, because we can access.
Yeah, speak for yourself, mate.
Just for Josie. Let's go for a palace. We've got altruism.
I feel some charities sort of are being like, oh, I see comedians are streaming, and would you ask me to support the charity? And I'm like, yes, but also please, I have no work. Feels very weird. A weird time.
Go on. You.
Pardon?
You can. Would you like, or shall I do the intro?
Well, the winner of Britain's Got Talent, and of course also the BBC Radio Comedy Award. That's how I would have bloody done it. I'm so excited. We shared a venue together, I think in 2016, I want to say, in Edinburgh, and would have a little chat every day. It's really exciting to have you on the virtual show. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Lost Voice Guy, aka Lee Rigby. Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
We've got some questions to ask you about this. Robin, have you got?
Lee's going to do. I think we're going to have a bit of a set as well. First of all, from Lee.
Amazing.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to his.
Intro.
I don't think it is. I'm not sure if it's his front room or his hallway, but please welcome live, direct from quite close to his radiator.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Before we get started, I don't always look this rough when I'm performing. I'm just worried in case a benefit fraud inspector is watching. So I'm trying to look as disabled as possible. This is also the reason why I won't be ending the show with my usual song and dance routine. Let me tell you, you get asked some really strange questions when you are disabled, though. My disability is called cerebral palsy. Recently, I was asked what sort of cerebral palsy I had. I wasn't even aware that there was different brands of it. I have definitely not got any designer brand of cerebral palsy. I think I picked mine up from Wilkinson's. Whenever I'm asked what sort of cerebral palsy I have, I always want to say I've got the bad kind. I don't know what they expect me to say. Next, they will be asking me to rate my cerebral palsy on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 being really bad, and 1 being a benefit cheat, appearing on the Jeremy Kyle show. I have been called many different names in the past. Just last week, someone called me physically challenged, which I always thought was a game on Crystal Maze. Of course, other names have not been as nice. In fact, I'm sick of getting pointed at, laughed at, looked at strangely, treated as if I am stupid, and called names just because I am different. It's not even my fault that I'm from Newcastle. It's at this point in my set when I like to remind people that I'm not related to Stephen Hawking in any way. However, I was asked by a taxi driver if I was as clever as him once. I'm clearly not as clever as him, or I wouldn't be in this generic town or city talking a load of rubbish. In fact, the closest I have ever come to being Hawking is when I went to see The Theory of Everything at the cinema. It's the movie about Stephen Hawking and his life. I didn't go to watch it though. I just went so that I could sit at the back, saying random sentences on my iPad and mess with the rest of the audience. Hawking would say something on screen, and then I would speak up at the back and explain that I didn't say that at all, and that the movie was putting words into my machine. One guy in front of me seemed to be really impressed that it was being shown in surround sound. Then, at other times, I would type what I thought he was going to say just before he said it. I often get asked if I am out with my carer as well. I really wish people would stop thinking that the people I am out with must be my carers. Because obviously disabled people couldn't just be out with friends. That would just be stupid. Just to put the record straight, I have always been very social and have a lot of mates. I had some great friends at school. Like most good friends, we got up to our fair share of mischief when we were together. Such as the time I borrowed my friend's wheelchair and stood outside a church, trying to sell it because a miracle had happened and I had been healed. Or when I went to the zoo with my mate who had one arm, went into the lion enclosure and asked him to point out which one of the lions had took the other arm in front of loads of children. And we used to love sending my blind friend really erotic letters from a pretend girlfriend because we knew his mother would have to read them to him. Another question that I get asked quite often is, have I ever tried to talk just to see what would happen? As if I had just been lazy all of my life and therefore just couldn't be bothered to talk. Like I was only putting it on to take advantage of the disabled parking. But, in case you are wondering, no, I haven't tried to talk before. Mainly because I know nothing would happen. Besides, I've built a career out of not being able to speak now. I don't think I should be encouraging my voice to magically reappear too much. The found voice guy just doesn't have the same ring to it. I do actually talk in my sleep, though. I know I do because I always wake up with random sentences typed out on my iPad. Admittedly, this job would be so much easier if I could talk. because apparently it's very important to get your tone of voice right when doing comedy. So that means I'm completely screwed. For example, this is what I sound like when I'm excited, and this is what I sound like when I'm miserable, and this is what I sound like when I'm happy, and this is what I sound like when I'm bored.
In fact, the only time I sound any different is on Tuesday nights when I pretend to be a woman.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been the Lost Voice Guy. If you find my voice, please contact me as soon as possible on my social media. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Lee.
Thanks so much.
We've got a couple of questions for you. Just the one that I, when in terms of when you started comedy about the BBC New Comedy Awards, which is what I know you best from. That's 6-7 years ago. Before that, what were your influences in kind of watching comedy? Who were the people you thought, right, that's what I want to do?
Well, I adore the League of Gentlemen. I think the gents helped to show me that being difficult was definitely an advantage when it came to being funny. They helped me view my life in a completely different way. Suddenly, rather than be self-conscious about. After all, I do quite enjoy knowing that an audience isn't entirely comfortable. I think it's a very powerful position to be in. But I'm also a huge fan of Ross Noble. I just love how quick-witted and random he can be. And he has been a massive help to me. Not only did he invite me to warm up for him at one of his Newcastle gigs, he has also been very helpful with advice and things like that. So I owe him a lot, both as a fan and as a performer.
Ross Noble is such a generous and kind man. He's the best. I remember the first time I got to go to the Melbourne Comedy Festival, he basically let about 5 of us come and camp out on his farm near Melbourne. It was the greatest night. It was like Willy Wonka. It was like we'd all won this prize. And he sort of like bought loads of little tents. It was astonishing. It was the most generous thing. And he took us on his on the back of his van to go and see kangaroos with a big torch. So we got to like shine down kangaroos. Yeah, he's the best. What a brilliant member of the comedy community. Like, what an incredible person.
Have you got Josie? Have you got any questions?
Oh, apparently Ross Noble's doing the same time, and some people are watching both at the same time.
Oh, we've clashed. It's ridiculous. Well, now you've told everyone. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye. Thanks for watching. I was wondering as well, Lee, whether you kind of do you feel like a trailblazer, or is it for others to declare your genius?
I didn't start stand-up comedy to become a role. I appreciate that I have inadvertently become one. I don't really see myself as an inspiration or anything. I'm just a bloke trying to get on with his life. I'm not doing anything special. But I don't mind if other people see me as a role model. If it helps encourage them to follow their dreams and gives them hope for the future, then I'm not going to complain about that. But, of course, some people don't like what I do, and it's fair enough as well. I appreciate that my comedy isn't for everyone. I had first-hand experience of facing an audience who weren't sure about the disabled bloke on stage at the start of the night. But by the end of the night, they'd forgotten all of that awkwardness and social anxiety and were just enjoying someone telling jokes for a living. I won't mention the time I got asked after a gig if I was a character. Suffice to say, some people are beyond help.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lee. And we should mention as well that Lee's book is out now as well. I think it came out a few months ago. So at the moment, of course, again, if you are looking for books, and you obviously get them on Kindle and things like that, go and look for Lee's book as well. And Lee, hopefully we won't be inviting you back, because if we're inviting you back, it means this has gone on for months and months and months. Because that's what we kind of go. So with luck, we pray we've got 2 weeks, but I hope you will come back. If this is still going on in May, I hope you'll join us again.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thank you, Lee. And a reminder again there about the tip jar at the bottom here, which is also to try and make sure that we build up a fund for a lot of the performers, the artists, musicians, comedians, etc., and also some of the smaller venues which they play in as well. Now we are joined by the author and podcaster and academic, who's Suzi Gage. Hello, Suzi. How are you?
Hello. I am situation notwithstanding. Good. Thank you very much. How are you?
Good. Yeah. I mean, you're involved in, obviously you're up in Liverpool in academia, and there's a kind of idea that for teachers and lecturers it must be really easy now, as opposed to actually the truth, which is in the schools and the colleges and the universities. It appears attempting to keep everything going but using the technology we have, people are working incredibly hard. How are you managing at the moment?
Yeah, I've seen some people say, universities are closed, but actually they're not. Universities are still entirely trying to do pretty much, or as much as possible that they can, but just not going into the buildings. So students are still going to be doing exams next month. I've spent the last couple of weeks marking coursework. We're moving all lectures online, seminars online, all sorts of things. So it's trying to sort of learn a completely new way of working with the students. And it's obviously there's more difficulties because not all students have access to technology to be able to get online to do some of these things. So that's kind of working out what students are being more or less disadvantaged by this, and just everything changing really. And obviously all the research as well, which is a major part of what I do too. I've got a PhD student who was just about to start running focus groups and then run a study which would involve bringing people into a lab and getting them to do experiments and that kind of thing. And obviously, we don't know when we'll be able to do anything like that again. So it's a strange old time.
And also it's a tough time because you've got, a book that came out this year, and like a lot of authors, one of the main ways that you can, you talk about your book, you go and you do festivals, you do events, you go to bookshops, and all of that has kind of been cut off. So can you tell us a little bit, say Why to Drugs, which I've read and is a very useful and interesting book.
Why, thank you. Here it is. I've got props, don't worry. So this has been the thing that I've been working on for the last 2 years, really. Kind of came out of the podcast that I started with Scroobius Pip, with the same name, which is looking at the science of what we know about the effects of recreational drugs, both short-term and long-term, making no distinction between drugs that happen to be legal or regulated in our society and drugs where you, if you are caught with possession of it or you're trying to sell them, you'll get into lots of trouble. It's any kind of psychoactive substance. And so it takes in the sort of the biochemistry, but also the societal impacts and the health and mental health impacts as well of various different substances.
Well, as we've got, Ed beforehand was talking about being a very, very big John Denver fan, and so I wonder if you can tell us about the kind of both the advantages and disadvantages of a Rocky Mountain High.
I was wondering where that was going.
Robin, absolutely.
Welcome to daytime.
We're like a very cerebral Holly and Phil.
Yeah. What's that, Eamon Holmes? What, all your work's gone? Yeah, Josie and Robin will be replacing you. But I was going to ask you, Ed, do you have, this book, you may not have seen it yet, but are there certain things, in terms of, on the comedy circuit, in entertainment as well, there are all manner of different things out there, and actually having some guide to understanding what can happen to someone's mind. I wonder if there's any particular kind of drugs you've read about, not that you're going to use or anything like that, that you just find that intrigues me, knowing about that from a kind of, from a scientific perspective, what they really do, what they're doing to the brain, what they're doing to communication. You're muted, I think. No.
Ed, you've muted yourself.
I think you're still on mute. Oh. Well, it's very... Do you know what? What you're doing, though, is you would have been a wonderful silent movie star. Yeah, excellent.
He's gone.
He's gone. He's had enough of that. He's
had enough. He's off.
Doesn't want to talk about drugs.
Because you talk about drugs, do you find that people now see you as like a druggy figure? Do people sort of like, what has that done for you? Has it been interesting?
It's really interesting. The kind of questions people ask about that.
I didn't mute myself. I did hang up on myself. I'm sure Trent muted me, but I could be wrong.
What's happening now. We've reached the point of narcissism in this isolation that we're hanging up on ourselves. This is... No, I just wonder, because I know that you're someone who does have a great interest in science as well, and that kind of scientific perspective of drugs, and that's what this book looks at what we understand. Some of them we have very little understanding of, I think, and I wonder if there's any in particular that you kind of read about. You think that is a fascinating thing to now we know there are experiments being done with LSD and stuff like that by David Nutt, where you are fMRIs are being used and stuff. Are there any way you go, now that's the one that fascinates me?
I think if you have too much knowledge, it can absolutely your buzz. That's one aspect. I know myself. With LSD, if you read too much about it, then and then take it, you'll become obsessed with what's happening. It all just becomes a bit too self-examinatory, if that's a word.
During this period of isolation, you are allowed to have self-examinatory. Did you find, Suzi, of the ones that you which you kind of deal with pretty much everything that's out there, as far as I know, it's a very complete book. Were there any where you really went, that is quite remarkable, that something can do, some psychoactive property can do that to the human mind?
I think the chapter I enjoyed writing the most was the chapter about ketamine. Just because it's a substance that, and I lived in Bristol for 12 years, and Bristol had a bit of a reputation for being quite a ketamine-y city. And as a recreational drug, there are risks to your bladder from using it, and it can be quite extreme. You can, because it's a dissociative anesthetic, you can find yourself in quite vulnerable situations where you're not able to necessarily look after yourself properly because of this kind of anesthesia effect that it has on you. And so in terms of a recreational drug, it's got that kind of a reputation, but it's also on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines because it's incredibly useful for its anesthetic properties. In other anesthetics also depress your breathing and your heart rate, but ketamine doesn't do that so much. So if you haven't got access to respiratory machines, then it's a sort of safer, for want of a better word, anesthetic to use. And it's also why it's really useful in veterinary medicine as well. It's apparently, so it's called a horse tranquilizer because that's kind of what it is. Although apparently it's really useful in camel surgery. That's what I learned.
Can I just have a moment to just congratulate Bristol? Because I don't know what a city has to do to get a reputation as being a bit of a ketamine cyst. But the fact that I think that's quite an achievement on
I don't know. I do worry that it says more about my circle of friends than it does about the city of Bristol. Just that's what I've heard. But
do you know, in terms of the ketamine thing, because you mentioned vets, almost one of the last gigs I did an event about canine ear health. So I had to come up. You know that thing. I'm sure, Ed, you've had those things where you get certain events you're asked to do, and you suddenly go, "I've never had to write a routine involving canine ear health before, so let's see where this goes." But I had to. I used to
5-minute dog ear bit. Everyone's got a 5-minute dog ear bit.
I was very lucky to have a long-haired dachshund when I was a child, and of course their ears, there's just so much material there, so that was good. But it was there was a book that I used to read from, a Mills and Boon, when we did book club, and it was called Vets at Cross Purposes, and there's this wonderful chapter where one of the vets is getting very angry about a drug called phenylbutazone or phenylbutazone. And I wondered whether that, if you know anything about that, he's furious because due to EU regulations and the banning of it, because it may get used in the horse meat food trade industry. And it's just this beautiful kind of, that bit where you go, this is just too much information for a racy romance. This is very much oh my God, I'm still a chapter short, phenylbutazone. I'll have a little argument about that.
I mean, I can't answer much about phenylbutazone, but I did interview a vet for the book, and particularly about the ketamine chapter. And it was the thing that I found really interesting is that drugs like ketamine, drugs that humans can use as drugs of abuse, are treated more sort of carefully, legally by vets than the drugs that they use to euthanize animals. The way that you have to manage ketamine in a veterinary situation is sort of by weighing it at the start and the end of each shift, and if any's gone, it has to all be accounted for. And if you take it out of the locked cabinet, then you have to make a note of it. If you have to take it out to tend to a horse or what have you, you have to keep really meticulous records. And it's kind of for the euthanasia drugs, apparently, and vets, if I'm wrong, please do correct me, but this is what I was told, is that it's sort of, you can do that, but you don't have to by law, which you do for drugs like ketamine.
Well, that may well change my reading of that chapter at the next canine ear health. I'll know that the pandemic is over when I'm back in a room, an event about canine ear health. Susie, have you got a show and tell, by the way, for us?
I do. I've got two, if that's allowed. Not my book. Yeah. Although that is here as well.
I'm just worried about the way that Ed's looking at your piano, thinking that could all be kindling.
Well, my first show and tell is a book of the piano music of all Chopin's preludes.
Is that what you've been doing?
I've been doing because I'm working in the same room that is my relaxation room. And so it's really difficult to sort of know when the work day ends. So what I've been doing is I've been closing my laptop and sitting at the piano and playing for an hour and kind of just like decompressing, and it's amazing. So Chopin has been good, but also some of the music from Westworld, all of the piano arrangements. So Heart-Shaped Box in particular by Nirvana and A Forest by The Cure. They're really beautiful sort of arpeggiated arrangements of those that I've managed to find online and work out, and so I've been playing those.
You do know that at the end we'll be asking you just to take your earphones and just go over to the piano and just play that, because the show that I might be doing or might not in October, it's called The Satanic Rites of Robin Ince, which is all about my kind of love of horror films when I was a kid, and hopefully we're going to do some gigs of those together, because Susie is also a huge admirer of Goblin and other of the 1970s.
I did used to be the keyboardist in a Goblin covers band called Il Goblin, which was one of the most fun times of my life, and really, really quite difficult to play. But the other thing...
What was the name of the band? What was the name of the cover band?
Il Goblini, yeah.
What you wouldn't have gone for Hobgoblin? No?
We wanted it to sound sort of Italian, but it just sort of, I think it was misjudged. But and the other thing I've got is, can you see that? It's build your own The Wicker Man puppet procession. Which was the best Christmas present I got this year. And that's my plan for the weekend. I'm going to build my own Lord Summerisle. Huh?
Can we get that from?
I'm sure Jim Murray found it for me, and I'm sure that I'll be able to find out where he got it, and I'll let you know. But yeah, it looks pretty amazing.
If by the way, if anyone didn't see yesterday's Shearsmith on, one of his show and tells was he was given a piece of wood from the original Wicker Man, like this wonderful.
It was that made me think about showing you this. Yeah,
and then Christopher Lee certified it as genuine for him.
Certified by Lord Summerisle. Thank you very much. And so, how are you when you're not doing the academic work? Have you managed to, as you were saying, you've created a structure for your day? Because I think that's what a lot of people are finding hard, is that bit of going. If you just, I mean, comics anyway know this. That whole thing of especially when you're a new comic and you go, well, I kind of have work today because I did 20 minutes this evening, and the rest of your day is just awful, kind of ether. And are you finding that possible?
It's tough. You have to kind of settle into not beating yourself up if you don't achieve as much as you would like, and just, I don't know, that's what I'm trying to do anyway, is sort of give myself a bit of a break and say, look, as long as I've done something, I've got dressed, I've had a shower, I've turned the computer on, I've sent a few emails, doing the marking was a good thing to do. That was something I'm really struggling to do research. And also at the moment, I've got a public engagement fellowship from the Wellcome Trust. And it's really difficult to do public engagement when you're not allowed to engage with the public. Lots of, like, maybe you say, well, that's fine, you just move it online. But a lot of the stuff I was doing before this was blogging and podcasting and online stuff. And the whole point of my fellowship was to try and do other things. So it feels a little bit like a step backwards, but I think it's just a step sort of sideways. And one of the really exciting things, so I teach on the medical degree at Liverpool, and a lot of our final year medics are being sort of fast tracked so that they can go to work as soon as possible and start sort of being on the front line. That's true of the medics and also of the nursing qualification that we do as well. So there's a lot of students in Liverpool who are about to be going and doing this really incredible thing. So with some other psychologists in our department and in the university, we're trying to create some resources to kind of offer support to these young people who are about to be going and doing something amazing, but potentially really, really tough for them.
Wow.
One final question for you. Everyone's always said, now I have this time, I'm going to do, I think there's going to be an enormous number of people who believed they were going to read James Joyce's Ulysses during the pandemic and have failed, as they failed in all other scenarios. Have you got one of those things, whether it's a film, a book or anything, you go, maybe now I've got the time?
I think the real victim in all of this are the assistants who work at production companies who are going to have to read all the really poorly structured but gag-heavy movie scripts written by comedians who are currently out of work. I think that's going to be the... and I think we will. I think, a year or 2 years down the track, there's going to be some really quite funny movies and plays. There's going to be some very thoughtful and dark plays written by comedians who are giving a new outlet to themselves. I'm sure it's something like that I'll churn out. I say that, but I'll probably just turn my woodpile into toothpicks.
Yeah.
I think the important...
Sorry,
I think the important thing, like to keep stressing to people, is that this is such an unusual time, and if you don't come out of it with a film script, you haven't let anyone down. Like there was a really nice tweet I saw that was like, you're not working from home, you are trying to work at home during a global pandemic. Like, it's just not, it's not the same. Nobody's life is the same apart from, I don't know whose life is the same. So
I have thought of a drug fact though that I find particularly interesting, which is that the legal definition of narcotic and the medical definition of narcotic are two different things. That I didn't know. I've learned that recently, because narcotics are specifically drugs that sort of put you to sleep, hence narco, as in narcolepsy. But in America, particularly, the narcotics division is just any drugs that are illegal. So you have like the narco gangs in Mexico, they're all selling cocaine. You say, guys, you aren't narcos at all. You have completely misnamed yourselves.
And I advise you to go and tell them that, because I feel they'll be very
going to have a wrongly worded letter.
I think we're probably coming to the end of our time, won't we?
Susie, are you able to go to the piano? You can leave your laptop.
God. You've put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Let me see if I take my headphones out. Is that going to be?
Yeah, I think you can even just leave. I don't know how. I reckon if you leave that there, and you can either play Goblin, whatever. Let's see what happens.
I'll try and play you some Chopin. All right.
Okay,
Copyright free, of course.
Everyone, by the way, for watching. Thank you very much, everyone who was able to donate as well. Next week, tomorrow in the morning, we've got Kids Science Show at 11 a.m. Josie's doing another Quarantine Comedy Club tomorrow night. And then Sunday, we've got 2 science Q&As. In the afternoon, we've got a science Q&A, which is a general one about physics, about the universe, about whatever you would like to ask about science. And then at 7 p.m. in the evening, as I've said already, to our great disappointment, due to Janet Street Porter and Vanessa Feltz saying no, instead we're having to do a Q&A about the pandemic with people who work in the world of immunology, virology, and mathematical statistics as well. So that will be on Sunday night at 7. And then next week, I think Monday Monday we have Russell Kane. Tuesday we'll have Tim Minchin with us. We have lots of other guests as well. So, and if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, that would be lovely. Wouldn't you say, Josie?
I would love it. Thank you so much. I'm a bit distracted today because I don't know why, but exhausted.
Well, I think that's quite comprehensible. Ed, Lee, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's really exciting to have you.
With her Chopin, it is Il Goblino's.
Just make it very wrong.
Thank you very much, Susie. That was great. That felt like a League of Gentlemen moment. You were going to turn around and have a skull face. Bye-bye.